Testing, 1, 2. Is it on now? Can you hear me? Testing, 1, 2. Testing. It's on good. Good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here. And I'm just thrilled with this crowd. You know, we've had on and off with COVID and all, but now it looks like you all have whipped it and you're back to get an excellent program. We're just delighted that the First Bank of Alabama is sponsoring this Sentimental Journey program for us. And we have some of their people here. Would all of you stand? Smile. Don't stand, Chris. You just wait. Sheila, I know that you'll enjoy this since you have Chris to take care of you. So just don't worry about it. But we appreciate you all and the work that you do, and you see what this does to the way of advertising. They'll all be by the bank this afternoon to borrow $1. Today is one of the special opportunities that you will have that we've had, because we've got Linda Rochester, who is going to talk to you about her book on Ms. Teel. Now, she's not just a newcomer to working with the public. She was in human services in Clay County and Talladega County, and she's worked the Sylacauga Circuit. She's been a college teacher. She's got 2 master's degrees, but what she's got more than anything else is a lot of savvy about how things went with the story of Miss Teel. The 2 master's degrees that she has is one from University of Southern Mississippi and one from West Georgia. But the best study that she's had was one in Millville on Ms. Teel and the relationship everywhere. So we're just thrilled to have Linda here. She's going to be around. We've got books for sale back there that don't dare leave without a book. Chris, please hold the door. If they don't have a book, they can't get out. They just... But, and she'll be signing the books, and we have people back there to help them with it. But the important thing, all the information and upgrades that she has, she really wants a good question and answer session. So don't be timid. And if we have to stay here till 3 o'clock, we're going to do that. But turn off your cell phones and pay attention. And Linda, we think it's an honor and a delight to have you. So we'll turn the program over to you, and you just do what you please with this audience. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Had to turn off my cell phone. Can you hear me? Good. Okay. All right. Now you can really hear me. Okay. My name is Linda Rochester. I'm from Clay County, Ashland, Alabama, but I've worked in all size counties. I worked in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, and Jefferson County, Clay, and Talladega. So I've just worked all over the place in social work. I worked in Talladega County as a social worker and a supervisor back in the 1980s. And now I'm a writer. And I have 2 master's degrees, one in social work, one in English, and working experience in both fields. But neither of these fields or careers taught me to believe in a psychic. I was schooled to believe in the facts, which is what I base my judgments on. That someone might be able to see beyond the facts was something I never considered. Did you? No. Intuition was a possibility in my world, but intuition was built upon prior facts. That is still how I run my business. I never considered the possibility that a clairvoyant might be able to be anything like a social worker. A social worker was interested in helping people, interested in their futures, and being prepared for things. Waiting until the bottom fell out was something a social worker tried hard not to practice. Proactive was the word I like to use when thinking of social work. To gain someone's trust was imperative in that field. How in the world did Miss Teel gain so many people's confidence? If you know anything about her, you probably know that people came from all over the country to see her. Law enforcement used her to find lost children. The business community came to her for financial advice. People came to see what she might know about things that trouble them in their past. Some people came to find out about the future. Some came out of curiosity, just to see what she might say. As I began to collect the interviews in this book, I began to think about her role as a social worker, like me, in the days before there was any such thing. I was only 10 years old when Miss Teel died. I grew up hearing about her. And though I wasn't a believer, I did start to stake out her house in passing. If I didn't look first, someone else mentioned it. The house stood behind trees across from the stores in Millville, Alabama. Do we have a photo of that? The photos of it. Let's see, that is Miss Teel with her family. Yes. And the second one is the one at her table with her cup and her spittoon. Do y'all know what a spittoon is? And she used it too. All right, and flip it for me to the next one. I want to show them. This is the Teel's house. Now, do note, this is such a funny picture. There's Mr. and Miss Teel. She was young at this time, and there is their son and daughter, and they're standing on the side thing. She had a sense of humor, you know. I'm sure she put this together. And Miss Teel was a small woman. Her husband was big and tall, and he mowed I think I've got this in here, but he mowed on the tractor without his shirt. And he just had his overalls on the tractor. And they said he had a small little tractor, a farm-all tractor. Do y'all know what that? Yeah. And he looked so funny on that little bitty tractor, being a big man. All right. I'd like to stop and ask for a showing of hands. How many of you went to Miss Teel or had family and friends who did? I was expecting 2 or 3. Is that not ever astonishing? Look at all those that I could have gotten for my book, in addition to these. Yeah. How many of you went to another psychic? Did any of you go to another? Several? Now, that's what I was expecting from Miss Teel. But there's several. How many of you have heard about Mrs. Cooch, the psychic in Anniston? Anyone? Okay. You're going to hear about her right now. I'm going to back up a step. I begin this book not with Miss Teel, but with Mrs. Cooch. And that is because, if not for Mrs. Cooch, I probably would have never had the experience that so many had in this book. The opportunity to know for absolutely certain that a fortune teller predicted something that came true. How can you know something for certain? Only one way. You heard it or you saw it. Two ways. Ms. Cooch was a fortune teller who lived in Anniston. She had spent 3 years in a concentration camp during the Holocaust and settled in Anniston with her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. She gave readings out of the basement of the family's house. Can you flip to the next? Yes, this is Dawn Mackey. This is my friend, Dawn Mackey. My interest in Ms. Teel began with something that happened to my friend Dawn's son, John. As I see it, there are 2 ways to know something happened in the past. The first is obvious, to see it yourself. The second is for someone to tell you, and then you stand there and watch it happen. Dawn told me that a fortune teller in Anniston told her that someone she loved was going to burn up in a red car that was near a bridge, and the police were going to come and tell her. I thought she said around 10 o'clock at night, but here's the thing. I didn't believe it was going to happen, so I didn't write it down. I can't really remember the specific time. I didn't bring my calendar. I did bring my calendar to show you what a nut I was about writing things down. And I was going to show it to you, and I left it in the car. It would have been funny, and it would have told you a lot about me, because I am a bit of a nut about writing things down. And that's part of being a social worker, write everything down. Dawn told me about this, but I didn't believe it was going to happen. But somehow I just couldn't quite discount it. Dawn had 2 children with red cars. One lived with her. She had already talked with her daughter, who lived with her. Now, I don't want to get off into the weeds, as my husband tells me when I'm telling a story. And he told me again today, he said, don't get off in the weeds when you're over there, if you know what that means. But I didn't believe that this was going to happen. I just didn't. I had been holding Dawn's hand through a very painful divorce that she was getting for about a year. Her son, John, had really been her favorite child. He had stayed with his father when she expected him to go with her. John was a college student at the time. I had just taught him at Southern Union Community College. I didn't put this part in the book, but I volunteered to go talk with John. I figured that this would be as good a time as any to butt my way into somebody else's business. Dawn had already talked with her daughter. She said she would talk to John. I realized I had overreached. I guess it was just the social worker in me. I don't know how long it was after this happened. It could have been days or weeks. But it wasn't so long after Dawn and I spoke about this that I woke up to the news. John Maddox had burned up in his red car. He pulled off the road on his way home from Anniston. His car exploded. This incident took place not a mile from a bridge. Dawn had told at least 2 more people about this event, including her 2 children. Both of these people were at her funeral a few months ago. Dawn read and approved what I put in the book. She just died. What I want you to know as my audience is that this book started with a very painful memory for Dawn and me. But it was the moment that I knew for a fact the power a clairvoyant might hold. There was one right down the road from where I grew up whose reputation was far greater than Mrs. Cooch's. Ms. Irene Teel lived not 10 miles from my house and not 20 miles from where we're standing right here. Many of those people who sat before her were still alive and had lived long enough to know if what she said had come true. I began the lengthy process of writing down these interviews in 2007. I asked people where I saw people. I called them on the phone. Everywhere I could catch people, I did just that. I caught them at McDonald's in the morning and wrote drafts on napkins. I caught them at reunions and ball games. Readings turned up just about anywhere. As you can see right here, I could have gotten a whole book full, more. And I'd like to have them too. I'll go ahead and tell you most of these readings that I have documented in the book came true to some degree. There were a good many people who went who didn't remember what she said. That suggests that the readings weren't very interesting or accurate. I do want to speak to this. Miss Teel knew that she didn't always get things right. She grieved over periods in her life where her powers declined. She believed that her gift was from God, and during dark days, she felt her spiritual life was to blame. One more thing I want to mention about the writing of this book. I didn't know I was writing a book in the beginning. At some point, though, I began to see patterns in what Miss Teel predicted. I decided to break the book down into sections, and this took me forever to break it down into sections. It was at this point that this book not only became a book about the clairvoyant, but also a book about the history of the place we lived over in Clay County. Today, we won't see a whole section about missing people because of the historical picture of the place at the time. You know why that would be. We've got park rangers. We had few of everything back then. Few cars, few telephones, few law enforcement, few park rangers. If you were lost, you were really lost, especially in the mountains. Lost animals were something that people went to Miss Teel to find. Animals were way more important at the time for obvious reasons. Food and safety were two things that are discussed in the book. Objects like jewelry were missing in ways that they aren't today. If you lost something then, or something got stolen, it was gone, and you weren't going to get another one, right? Yeah. And that hurt people. How many children people would have seems a little bit ridiculous by today's standards. But from the beginning to the middle of the 1900s, family sizes were unpredictable. 10 to 2 is a large leap, isn't it? But a lot of people had 10 children. My grandfather had 10 children. To find out how many children you would have was important to those who went to her. The future and the past are interesting in popular readings, but the most daring were those in the categories of crime and intervention. I would like to preface this short discussion by saying that the readings in these categories crime and intervention, would have probably gotten Miss Teel into trouble if she had done what she did today. They are the most risky and the most interesting sections of the book. To accuse someone of a crime was a big deal, especially with no evidence except for what a clairvoyant said, right? And Miss Teel wouldn't have had any evidence. It was just her word. It is difficult to ignore the readings that came to fruition in those two categories, crime and intervention. The category where Miss Teel was the least successful, at least as we now know, was beneath the ground. Miss Teel believed that minerals were going to be found, and they weren't. Some of these people held on to their property in hopes of finding minerals that haven't turned up. Still, will they? We still don't know what's under the ground, do we? That said, don't skip over them. What is under the ground is still a mystery. Several people that I've talked to are still waiting to sell their land because of their readings with Miss Teel. As to the section on rumors, please don't skip over that if you want a good laugh. There was rumors all over the place. We learn a good bit about ourselves and our ancestors in that section. And they are hilarious, too, some of the things that got said about her. The last section, friends and kin, mainly involves stories from people who lived around Miss Teel. Now, I love this section. This is a must-read section. Miss Teel was a wonderful neighbor, a good friend, and a well-thought-of boss, and a generous benefactor to her community. She was always contributing to Millville. Does anybody here did anyone come from Millville in here? No? No. No, it was a little bitty place. Had about 5 stores, right? Yeah, but you know where it is, yeah. Went through there, yes, you went through there. I bet a good many of you went through there, yeah. That said, there were those who didn't believe in her gift, who thought her to be a good psychologist with tricks up her sleeve about getting information or the truth out of those who came to her. That's said a good bit. Now, I'll give you a sample of some readings in the book, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Let me say, I did pick the ones from Sylacauga to read to you out of the book. I had a good many from Sylacauga. You know, it's just down the road. This would be a drop in the bucket, as you see just how many went to her in this group. The one that you're going to recognize first, yes, let's go on through the, okay, stop right here. And I'll get to this one in a minute, but the first one is Ricky Dunn Tankersley. How many of you know about Ricky Tankersley? Yeah, yes, okay. Well, he's from Sylacauga. And this was summarized from an article in the Birmingham News and an interview with Rick Tankersley by Billy Fields. And it is online. You can see it online. Go to YouTube and click on Lights, Camera, Alabama. Now, I'm on there too. Billy Fields was on there, and I'm on there because Billy knew that I was writing this book, and Ricky Tankersley's in that. He interviewed him. The most talked about case in Ms. Teel's career happened when a 2.5-year-old boy, Ricky Dunn Tankersley, who had been missing all night in a wooded area 4 miles outside of Sylacauga. Hundreds of people searched for the child, along with airplanes and men on horseback, after Ricky had wandered away from home with 2 dogs. The child had been missing all day before, and out of desperation at 7 p.m., Ricky's father went to Miss Teel. She told him why he came and gave him directions, but he didn't find the boy. He went back to see Miss Teel at 3 a.m. Miss Teel told him that he hadn't looked far enough. She got a paper bag, tore it open, and drew a map from his house across a stream and onward to his son, who was laying on the ground. His father and crew followed the map to the boy. Ricky was shaking from the cold and was rushed to the local hospital. Miss Teel was worried about the weather and was afraid his father wouldn't be able to follow the map. She went to the family's home to make sure the boy got home safely. He did. Now, this right here is Joe and Dorothy Robertson. This one is going to tell you some things about how much trouble you could get into by listening to Miss Teel's stories. Joe Robertson, as told to his son, Dennis Robertson, passed on to Linda Rochester in 2021. The time was around 1937, before Joe went to World War II. He lived near 2 brothers-in-law. The 3 of them liked to go coon hunting with their dogs. Have any of y'all been coon hunting? Anybody out here? Yeah, coon hunting. A lot of fun. Dad scraped up enough money to buy a good coon dog. Back then, $12 to $15 was a lot of money. That is around what Dad paid, and the dog showed great promise. The first time they turned the dog loose, they blew the foxhorn, and all but the new dog came back. Dad and his friends searched for several hours for the dog and couldn't find it. They were hunting in the Rock Springs area near Millville. Dad, at Mother's suggestion, and there's Dad and there's Mother, went to Miss Teel to ask about the dog. Miss Teel said, "Oh yeah, your neighbor killed the dog for chasing his chickens. He burned the dog's collar in the fireplace." The neighbor lived a quarter of a mile up the road. Dad got his gun and loaded it, intending to kill the neighbor. Mother was tall for a woman, and Dad wasn't. See, he's got a hat on. She's about that much taller. Both Mother and my grandmother had to fight Dad to stop him. In the scuffle, Mother broke one of Dad's ribs. Finally, Mother was able to calm Dad down and talk him out of killing the neighbor. Miss Teel said the man's name, which I won't mention because the man had family members who were still alive. "I still have the gun that Dad was going to use," Dennis said. Dad was mad for the rest of his life at the man who did it. See, this could have gotten somebody into a lot of trouble, couldn't it? Yeah. All right, let's flip to the next one. Okay, this is Catherine Barkley Vaughn. And this story was told by her, and it was about her husband, Andrew Barkley, and passed on to Linda Rochester in 2018. Catherine grew up in Millville with her parents and siblings. She knew Miss Teel all her life. Catherine remembers when people used to criticize Miss Teel for telling fortunes of black people. Catherine said, "The mumbling didn't make any difference to Miss Teel. Black people went to see her over the years, and they felt welcomed." My husband, Andrew Barkley, went to Miss Teel, Andrew had gone out to where Daddy was plowing one day. Daddy stopped the horse and turned around to sit on the plow. Soon, plow stop. Do y'all know what a plow stop is? I guess. While he had a conversation with Andrew. Sometime later, Andrew missed his wallet. After looking everywhere, he gave up and went to Miss Teel. Miss Teel said, "I see your wallet fell out of your pants pocket. The mule kicked dirt over it when you left. Go back there and you will find your wallet." Andrew did go back to the spot where Daddy was plowing, and that is where he found his wallet. Now, all right, flip. Yep, okay, this is Ellen Jacobus, my cousin. And this was told by her daughter, by Ellen's daughter. Okay, this is Norma Willis. Oh, okay. This is Ellen Jacobus. The story is about my Aunt Norma, Ellen's mother. So Ellen is telling the story about her mother, and this would have been my uncle's wife. That would be my aunt by marriage. Shared with me in 2007. That's a long time ago. Ellen's mother, Norma Kurt Willis, went to visit Ellen for Easter in 1950. That's a while back, isn't it? While Ellen was living in North Carolina. Ellen's husband was in college at North Carolina University at the time. Ellen and Norma were in Ellen's small kitchen at the sink, since there was no other place where they could have a quiet talk in a tiny apartment. Norma had been to Miss Teel. Flip. All right, this is Ellen's father and Norma's husband. His name's Beeman Willis. He's also my uncle. Miss Teel said, "Norma, I don't want to worry you about this. You know your husband isn't well." Norma said she didn't know he wasn't well. Miss Teel said, "Your husband is going to die sometime in September. By the middle of September, he won't be here." You know, one thing about these, people remembered specific wording about something Miss Teel said. They could tell you exactly what she said, and that sounds just like what somebody might have said. She might have said to somebody. Ellen said, "Daddy, Beeman Willis, was living and working in Detroit as a supervisor in a clothing plant. He was making good money and sending it back home. Mother had been to visit Daddy several times. He didn't have anything wrong with him, and Mother didn't believe Miss Teel's fortune was going to come true. She had gone to Miss Teel before. Nothing came of it. Still, our grandfather, Jasper Alexander Willis, had made a lot of money in the stock market by going to Miss Teel. I didn't believe anything was going to happen," said Ellen. "Then one morning in mid-September, I sat straight up in the bed and told my husband, 'Daddy's dead.' A few minutes later, Mother was on the phone saying that Daddy was dead." Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. Flip. Do y'all know Janet Williamson? Anybody in here know Janet Williamson? Yes, yes. Yep. All right, this is Mrs. Williamson as told to her daughter-in-law, Janet Williamson, and passed on to me in 2007. Also, I've been back to see Janet when I first took out all these books, got all the first books, and she bought 10. She said, "I'm going to give them to everybody I know." Janet was a bank teller here in Sylacauga. Remember that? And she remembers a story that was told to her by her mother-in-law, Mrs. Williamson. Mrs. Williamson went to see Miss Teel out of desperation. Her husband was a soldier in World War II, but hadn't been heard of in several months. The family feared the worst. Miss Williamson made an appointment and went to see Miss Teel. Miss Teel knew why Miss Williamson came, but all she said was, "I see him standing by the window." By the window. She didn't know the Williamsons and didn't call Mr. Williamson by name. Mr. Williamson came home when the war was over. He had been captured by the Germans and was held in a prison camp. He was locked in a small room for months. The only way he could pass the time was to look out of a very small window. Isn't that weird? Weird. Okay, flip. Y'all know Dr. Bill Friday? Yeah, yes, okay. He's not here. Somebody said where he was today. This was on Lights Camera Alabama, and I'm on it too. So Bill and me, and there's several people on Lights Camera Alabama. So do take a look at that. It's on YouTube. All you have to do is just pull it up. Dr. Bill Friday was hunting with a friend when he was 10 or 12 years old. He was carrying a pocket watch that had been passed down from his grandfather. He lost the watch somewhere along the way. He and his friends spent hours looking for the watch. When Dr. William Friday, Bill's father, took them to Ms. Teel. Couldn't find the watch, looking, and Dr. William Friday took these two boys there. Ms. Teel sat down with the boys and gave them specific instructions as to where the watch could be located and drew a map on a piece of paper. The boys went back, followed the instructions, and found the watch within a short period of time. Dr. William Friday, his father, was a man of science, Bill said. My father didn't address the matter of how Mrs. Teel successfully found the watch. Well, here's the thing. People would say, I don't believe in them. I don't even think it's Christian. I don't even think it's right. I'm a man of science. I don't believe in a fortune teller. But when push came to shove, what did they do? Went to see her, gave in, went to see her, found it, didn't say another word about it. Didn't say I was wrong, didn't say nothing. Oh, and I understand that. Okay, let's flip. Flip to the next one. Flip. Oh, yeah, there's Maggie Bell. Okay. Look at her hair. Oh, no, go back one. I'm sorry. Yeah, look at her hair. Isn't that beautiful hair? Remember how people used to wear hair all curled like that? Oh. Maggie Bell Guthrie, as told to Linda Rochester, 2021. One day, okay, this is the last one in the book. Let me just stop right here and tell you. This is the last one in the book, and it's kind of a funny thing because it involved a surprise from my husband. A little surprise from my husband to be the end of the story, to be involved in the end of the story. It's sort of a little surprise. Ha ha. One day, Miss Teel came to my mother's, Mrs. I.A. White's store in Millville. You know those little stores right in Millville. She had one right in there. Miss Teel said, "Don't go home alone tonight by yourself." What would you do? I don't think I'd go after coming to this. Do you? If she said that, no. But, well, the thing was, people, she said that, and Miss White just didn't pay any attention. She went home anyway after she got off work, thinking nothing was going to happen. As good a friend as she was of Miss Teel's, right across the street from her, and she still didn't really believe. Mother went home anyway after she got out of work. My half-brother Alwyn and I were with her. Mother knew immediately that someone had been in her house. You would have to know Mother. She kept everything perfect. The things in her drawers were perfectly folded. Everything was in its place. She could tell that things had been messed up. We went back on the porch when a man came around from the side of the house with a big shotgun. The man held the gun on my brother while we ran. My mother had been doing well at the grocery store. The man must have heard something of it. The man found the money inside the house. Mother went to the police station to make a report. She also went across the street to tell Miss Teel. Miss Teel told her to tell the police to go to the Goodwater bus station. They did, and the man had just arrived on the bus. Now, he did let Alwyn go after, the mother and daughter ran. He didn't want to kill anybody. He just wanted to get the money and get gone. How did he get on a bus, I asked. I don't know. I guess he flagged one down. You could flag a bus down, and it would stop for you back in those days. The police got him at the bus station. He hadn't had time to spend the money. He was a Rochester. Rochester, I stumbled. He had to be our kin. Small world. I half laughed, knowing that I had stumbled onto a whopper. You never know when a story is going to be closer to home than you think. I guess no one thought to tell us, since all the Rochesters besides our family had disappeared in Clay County by the time we were children. They either died out or ran out. But one thing we knew by that time was that a good many of them were trouble coming. This was the Rochesters. Okay, now we're at the trial against Taylor, Uncle Taylor. The Honorable A.L. Hardegree Sr. was the attorney for the state in the case against Taylor Rochester. The Honorable C.W. McKay was Taylor's attorney. Some of the key evidence in the case against Taylor involved his clothes and hat that were hidden on Francis Marion Willis's, my great-grandfather's, farm out at the High Pine community. The testimony shows that Taylor walked back to Ashland through my grandmother's family, the Pace Allen farm. My husband was kin to the Allens. I was kin to the Paces. The Rochesters also lived in the High Pine community, near both of the other families. Eyewitnesses were presented to argue that Taylor was playing cards in Talladega the night of the robbery. One of those men was a suspect whose house was searched. Mr. McKay, Taylor's lawyer, mentioned Ms. Teel's name as being one of the reasons for the search warrant, which I think is a no-no. You're just not supposed to do that, which would have been iffy at best for the purposes of getting a warrant. Mr. McKay asked Alwyn in the trial, "Did Miss Teel tell your fortune?" Mr. Hardegree said, "We object." The judge said, "Sustain the objection." Mr. McKay said, "We accept and expect the answer to be she did." Maggie Bell was a child when this happened back in 1948. The money was not inside the house, but was in her half-brother Alwyn's possession. Alwyn turned over the $365 to the man in a mask, dark hat, and coat. The man was found, as Miss Teel said, at the bus station, but he was in the bus station in Talladega. Maggie Bell remembered Goodwater. Taylor had the money, as she said. The thief was Taylor Rochester, my uncle by marriage. And my husband was a judge, retired judge, and Taylor was a criminal. Taylor was sentenced to 10 years for theft, but served 5 years in prison. He was released for good behavior. He had married a daughter, but his wife got a divorce. He remarried and died in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My husband had never heard about the story until someone found a transcript of the trial in a storage room at the courthouse over in Clay County. Surprise! Another uncle of the Rochesters had children who grew up in Millville, and they had never heard of the story either. You'd think they might have heard something about it. Never did. They would have been close to the age of Maggie Bell. I mention this to make a point about Clay County and Millville in particular. Clay County as a place is generally accepting. This plays out in many of Miss Teel's stories. Grudges aren't often held, and you aren't held accountable for what your family did. Also, the hint of fear of getting even is mentioned in several places in this book. Living with your ghosts is a complicated idea that Clay County seems to have mastered. Good for Clay County. One for Clay County. Those were the notes that I had. I don't know how much time we have left.
We have plenty of time left, and I know you wanted to do some questions.
I certainly did.
If you've got a question, we're going to have 2 microphones. Because we're recording, we won't be able to hear your question on the recording if you don't speak into the microphone. So we're going to have somebody on this side. Pam's going to go on this side, and I'm going to come on this side. So if you've got a question, raise your hand, and let's try to get it with the microphone. Okay. Anybody got a question? Let me come over here to it.
Oh, what? All right, let's see. Come over this way to. Yeah.
Was that house you were talking about in Millerville, when you get right there at that stop sign, is that the big old house over there on the right?
Yes, back behind all the trees.
Oh, okay.
You can barely see it today, but used to, you could really see it, couldn't you? Go ahead and flip that to the next picture. That was Alwyn and Maggie Bell. I'd like for them to see them. There they are later. Alwyn and Maggie Bell. All right, what is another one? No.
Did Miss Teel ever address her gift of, sight like that? Did she
Yes.
ever talk to anybody about that?
Yes.
Did she feel like she'd been blessed or cursed?
Okay, I'd like to answer that in 2 ways. I didn't mention that, and it's important. Her mother didn't really like any of it, and there's a good bit written about it in the beginning. There was already things that they were seeing, even as a young child, that should have raised a red flag. Her father was the one that she confided in and that kept her back, in other words, held her back, held her up, believed in her. So that was addressed in the family. I don't know if her mother ever really would have liked it. It just wasn't a thing that was appropriate. Now, there was a big blowback in the churches. They just despised it at first, and they just looked down on her. And she lived in Coosa County, Talladega County, and Clay County, and wound up there in Clay County, where she lived the rest of her life. And there are some stories about Talladega County, Sylacauga in this book right here. And church people turned on her for a while, and then she found her little nest. She was a big believer. I wanted to say this about her. She's buried out in a cemetery where she didn't go to church. And the reason she wanted to be buried there was because she could look out at where they first lived when they were married. And it would just make her feel happy. But now, she was weird. I'll just tell you that. And this will be an example. She didn't want to be buried in the cemetery. She wanted to be buried out in the trees with her husband. So if you go to the cemetery, you will see their cemetery, her grave out in the trees. I don't know, you know what I mean? She was just odd, to say the least. Yeah.
How long did she live in Coosa County?
You know, I've forgotten that, but I've got it in the book. But a while, she lived in Coosa County. And the Vansandts, you know the Vansandt family over in Sylacauga? They're all kin to her, the Vansandts, here in Talladega County. But they came from Coosa County. You find that in this book right here. I wrote it, but I've forgotten that one. Yeah.
Question is, do you believe, I'm going to say one thing. My mother lived in Los Angeles. She was born and raised here. I called my mother and I told her about one of the neighbors. She said, I told her what he was doing. He had passed and what he was under. So she went with the neighbor and he was under, and everything I told her was correct.
So you had a real, yes, I do. And it was because of Dawn's experience, because I know for a fact. She told me that. Yeah. When you see it, you know, when her son died, just like Miss Teel said, in a red car, I knew right then that there was some clairvoyant could know these things. Now, there was no other way on earth I was going to, because I'd gotten me a master's degree, I had me a social work degree, I believed in facts, I believed in everything, and I thought it was all just limited to that. Until that. And then that opened up the world, just like you had that experience right here. Yes. No.
Yes. What is the difference between a clairvoyant and a prophet or soothsayer? I mean, I know the soothsayer
Yeah.
and the clairvoyant are similar, but prophecy. I don't really know how to say this, but different times I have known something that was going to happen ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I don't know to call it clairvoyant or what, but it's been a lot of things that's happened that I already knew was going to happen. And I tell people, and they kind of look at me strange.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a gift, though, right? It's a gift, but it's nothing to be afraid about, because it was even in the Bible where people knew stuff
Yeah.
that was going to happen. But my problem with that is if people take that and use a gift, you know, just for self-gain, mostly
Yeah.
for self-gain.
Yes. You know a lot of people like that, don't you, in this field? You go places and you'll see their signs places. Why don't you believe that? Well, it's because they're making money. That's a good way to make money, isn't it? So, no, we don't believe everything. All right, now you asked me 2 or 3 things, and they were good questions. One of them, we called her a fortune teller, a soothsayer, a clairvoyant, and all of them mean about the same thing. And you asked me if I believed. I do believe. That I do. Because I know. I know, but I can't make you know. But I know because, you know, you have to experience it. You don't know me. I might have made it up. But I know me, and I know that I could have never made that up. However, up until this point, until this point in time, I would have not written a book about Miss Teel. I would have not believed in soothsayers. I would not have believed in fortune tellers or clairvoyants or any of it. And they were the same thing. Now, about your thing right here, I don't have that. I don't see things coming. Now, I do see I see things as a social worker. I could know that trouble was going to get you into trouble. That's just something that's going to happen. But no, I did not know. I didn't. I don't know things like that, like you do. Yeah. She had one more thing to say here, I think.
The prophet is different, and I know the Bible says that don't go to soothsayers. Don't,
Yeah, the Bible
it
says,
says don't go. But, when people are given things by God, everything comes some kind of way. You get visions and things, and the prophets were getting visions
Yeah,
through
in the
God.
Bible.
Through God, it wasn't something that just came to them. But if God is showing the prophet, then who's showing the soothsayer? That's another.
Okay. Well, I tell you, I can't answer it, but I can say this much. I really appreciate you bringing that up because that was used against her, as you know. And have y'all ever been to New Orleans? And there's ones down there. There's ones other places. But here was Miss Cooch way up here that, was not, and she was telling them out of a basement, not charging a fee, and a Holocaust survivor at that. You know, so all I can say is that this is a place where you've got to really watch before you walk in there because people do use it as a con. There's a lot of con artists out there, and they're good at it. And they can take a look at you and read you and then tell you something vague, right? And then you've fallen for it, and it doesn't go anywhere. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Do you believe in women's intuition? I believe in that
Yeah.
because I have it.
You have intuition. And I think that's sort of what she's talking about here, is that intuition. Yeah. I do believe in intuition. And I think that some people have it and some people don't. Let me tell y'all this, I don't have it. I don't have a drop in me. I can't tell what's coming tomorrow. I might go to bed worrying about it, but it wouldn't.
We,
Yeah, not one drop.
Miss Linda, we got a question over here. They want to know how many children she had. And what was the other, Miss Ginger? How many children did she, and how much did she charge? That's what somebody asked.
Okay, there's been a lot of debate on how much she charged. Some people said $25. I think Patsy Riley may have paid her $25. She was on her deathbed when she saw some of these people in this book. And she may have charged it, but also people forget, how they think they paid more than they paid. I forget things too. So I don't, it wasn't much, $2, dollar, just at the time, whatever. Yeah. It was a charge. She charged. Who put a soothsayer on her? I don't know that many people called her that at the time. They just called her a fortune teller. And I named her a psychologist and a social worker and a psychic. A witch. Okay, the witch. I didn't get a chance. I might have. Did I answer all of that?
How many kids did she have? That
How
was
many
the other part of
kids?
that.
2 children. 2 children. Yeah. Those 2 on that picture. Yeah, well, a lot of people. A lot of people had 10 children, but she didn't.
I would like to know if you know where the Teels came from originally with the name Vansandt. It sounds very Dutch.
They came actually just from Goodwater, the Vansants, but you're right. I think it was French. I think. Well, it may not be. It may be Dutch. I don't know. I really never looked it up, but I'd like to know now that you mention it.
Jewish and Frank. Vansandt.
She wasn't Jewish. Mm-mm. Let me, what else? Somebody asked another question I wanted to answer over here. What was that?
Miss Linda, we have one back here. They wanted to know
Okay.
if the gift was handed down in her family. Did
Okay.
anybody else have that?
There was one in here about that somebody else was going to get it. But her daughter, Bonnie, her granddaughter, Bonnie, lived with her for a while. And as far as Bonnie knew, there wasn't anyone yet. Now, you know the Teels over in Coosa County. You know the Teels. Yeah, they live here. Robert, yeah, they live here. And so she was going to come today, but Robert's wife was going to come, but she fell and has hurt herself. But as far as they know, there's no one in the family that has the gift yet. Yeah. Anybody else? There was somebody that asked something real good that I wanted to answer over here.
One comment on the discussion that we're having about what she's called. Just about everything I read about her, she considered herself a mind reader.
Yeah.
She kept mentioning that. And she was actually born in Rockford and was there for a long, long time. And she was born with the veil on her face,
Yes.
which she's very famous for that. But she lived down there for most of her young life and went to school. And her husband came into that area for some reason. And later she met him again and married and moved on out that way.
She did.
But I did think that mind reader was kind of interesting because it did sound a little bit like when you look at what she could do, that she really could read minds to tell people when they came in, you know, I can't tell your fortune because you don't believe in me.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting point to make
Yeah,
to
they
the
did.
audience since they're interested.
Yes. Yeah, I imagine that is correct about mind reader. And that was mentioned time and again. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's, right over here. Yeah, we are. The history book is in the library of Coosa. From Coosa.
Wagupka, not Rock,
Uh-huh.
but maybe halfway in between. There's a picture of them.
Uh-huh. I've got it in the
In the
book.
history
I
book.
tell you this, though, I wrote this book, and now I can't remember things.
When you get older, it'll get worse.
I'm afraid of that. I know it already. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share this. When I was in the 9th grade, I dreamed that my father would die during my 11th grade finals. And that's exactly when it happened. I don't understand it, don't know why. I don't claim to be anything close to that.
Have you ever had any?
Things do happen.
Have you had any other?
Yeah, I'm not ready to share those, but
Well,
I mean, it'd be at less than a handful.
let me
You
tell
know,
you that what you should
But
write
this
it
was
down.
Specific.
Write it down and pass it down.
Yeah, got it.
Pass it down. That happens to people. I'll just tell you, it don't happen to me. I can't see tomorrow. But you need to write that down. What about others?
Do we have any more questions? Okay.
Promise one more. Is the Teals the originators of the elixir Teals?
I don't
Don't know.
I don't know, but I tell you this, probably so, because that name's not really that common, you know. And, yeah.
If we don't have any more questions, Miss Linda, I wanted you to make sure to tell them about the proceeds of your book.
Yes,
what you
the
did.
proceeds are going to the Clay County Historical Society, and I hope you'll enjoy this. You know what? When I started to bring the book I was looking at to show y'all, why I was trying to pick out the stories that were good in it, and there was too many. I just had every page turned, and I thought, I can't tell all these people all that. They'll run me out of there. But it was hard to pick stories, and there's lots of good ones in here. And you'll know people like Patsy Riley, you know, governor's wife, yeah. You'll know, and there's one big whopper at the end of the book, toward the end of the book, that I'd like for you to look for. It's Mary Gail Maine, because she told something that came true that was of national significance in the end of this book. So take a look for it. Thank y'all so much. I had a great time. Y'all were a great audience.
Thank you, Miss Linda. Thank you, Miss Linda. She's been so nice to work with. Y'all, please make sure to buy a copy of her book. Take it home. It's a very easy book to read. And then next week, we will see you again. We have Tina Hosey coming to sing next week. She always does a great job. She'll have a couple of friends with her to play and sing. So we thank you so much to the bank. Sheila, you and Mr. Chris, thank y'all for being here and for all that you do. We will see you next week.